Hello students and welcome to the lecture. So students, as we know that we are covering the financial system and basically we are discussing over the Indian stock market, right? These were the topics we had, you can say, designed for the discussion. And so far, we had completed the introduction part. We had completed the National Stock Exchange. We had done with the Bombay Stock Exchange. Okay, these are the topics which we had completed. And in the previous lecture, basically we had started with the market participants. We had discussed the brokers and hedge funds and arbitrage depositories areas. All right, I hope that you have revised that lecture properly before you have come for this lecture, because as I have told you many times, it is for your own benefit. So now the topics we are left with is a regulatory framework, trade mechanism, price discovery, clearing and the settlement, market instrument, economic roles / conclusion. Okay, so these are the topics we are left with. So let's start where we end up in the previous lecture. All right, we had completed the brokers. We had you can say discuss the depositories and the depository participation. Please keep the NSDL and the CDSL full form in your mind. It will be asked in the examination. Okay, thereafter we had seen this. Arbitrageurs we had seen, examples we had seen. Now hedge funds also we had seen. Difference between the hedge funds and the mutual funds we had discussed. Okay, so now it's a regulatory framework. Okay, it means that now we have to start with the regulatory framework. However, we had seen that the National Stock Exchange and the Bombay Stock Exchange, we had seen that both of them, National Stock Exchange as well as the Bombay Stock Exchange, both of them are being controlled by the Securities and Exchange Board of India, right? Known as the SEBI. Got it? Both of them are controlled by them. But right now, what we are required to do, basically we are required to understand the regulatory framework, like how these things are being regulated. Okay, so let's start with the overview. The Securities and the Exchange Board of India, SEBI, plays a crucial role in regulating and supervising the securities market in India, as we had just discussed in the previous lectures and in this lecture starting also. Okay, so right now what we are going to do, basically we are going to see the framework, like how the framework is designed. We know that the SEBI is basically the controller and the regulator of these stock exchange markets and all, but what is the structure, like how they do it, that is the main thing. Okay, so basically if we begin with this thing, then first thing which we have is the SEBI's structure. Like how does the SEBI structure? SEBI is structured with various departments and the sub-bodies, each responsible for different experts of the market regulation and the enforcement. It means that basically when we're talking about the SEBI, when we talk about the SEBI, then SEBI is basically the organization, right? SEBI is basically then organization, but inside SEBI there are so many departments. Suppose A, B, C, D and various other departments here. All right, so all of these departments having the one common organization called SEBI, but SEBI having all the departments, and these departments are basically, you can say, trained at handling various tasks assigned to them. Okay, and this is basically, or you can say many times we call it as a divisibility of work. Okay, divisibility of the work. All right. So keep this thing in your mind. SABE is an organization having the different departments which are trained at handling various tasks which are assigned to them, and this is what we call divisibility of the work. Got it? So if we go ahead, first department we have the market regulation department. This department, responsible for formulating regulations and guidelines for the securities market, ensures fair practices and the investor protection. As I had told you in the previous lectures also, suppose this is the National Stock Exchange. Okay. This is the Bombay Stock Exchange. All right. This stock exchange nearly having 2203 agencies, or you can say companies basically. This is having nearly 5,000 companies. Okay, so what we want them to be perform in the well enough manner. All right, and we want to ensure that these companies are doing the practices in the fair and the integrated manner. All of these things basically we are assuming. Now the question is, until or unless the paper has been provided to them, or you can say until or unless the rules and regulations defined clearly on the paper, how does we could say that whether they are doing well or not, or whether they are doing as by the law or they are violating the law? How we could do this? So that's why the first step we have is the formulation of the regulatory framework. Got it? First, when the regulations are on the paper, the rules and the regulations have been defined, then we could ensure that these rules and regulations must be followed in the proper manner. Okay, this is the first case. And who designed these policies? Market regulation department. Market regulation department is an you can say department of the SEBI, which is responsible to define the rules and regulations, and then these rules and regulations could be expected to be followed by NSE, BSE and their participatories. Ensures the fair practices and the investors protection. And why the investor protection is responsible, we had already discussed this in detail during the SEBI's lecture. Okay. Enforcement department. The enforcement department is responsible for investigating and taking action against violation of SEBI regulations, ensures compliance with the rules and regulations of the securities market. Okay, so remember, once you can say once the rules and regulations defined, okay, suppose there are 10 rules have been defined, rule 1, 2 and therefore rule 10. All right, 10 rules have been defined. Now the question is, who will ensure that whether these rules are being followed or not? How do we will be able to get that whether there is a violation and all? How? The question is by examine by analysis, right? and this could be done by carried out the investigation. Okay, and this investigation and the proper follow-up is a part of which particular organization or which particular department in particular? Enforcement department. Enforcement department is in particular, or you can say the department of the CB which is now responsible to check out whether these rules and the regulations are being followed or not, and by carrying out the investigation. All right. Market surveillance department. This department monitors trading activities in the securities market to detect any irregularities or manipulation, helps maintain market integrity and the fairness. Okay, like if any illusion of wealth created in the market. Okay, so countering this is a task of the market surveillance department. All right, like they basically see, and you can say they basically try to detect any irregularity or the manipulation. Okay, and because of this they could ensure the market integrity and the fairness. All right, this is what we call as a market surveillance department. Thereafter what we have the another thing which is known as the investor protection and the education fund, in short as IPEF. Now you have gotten question like IPEF, which is an department of SATHEE. What is the full form of it? Okay, like what is the full form of IPEF, which is now the department of the SATHEE? It is known as investors protection and education fund. Okay, the full form of the IPF is the investor protection and the education fund, which comes under the department of SATHEE, right? This fund is managed by the SEBI and used for investor education and awareness programs, aims to protect the interests of the investors and the security market. Like in the previous example, we had already taken the example of it. Suppose if this is a case of the FII. Okay, you can say suppose the company is XYZ. Okay, or you can say not a company. Suppose let's take an example of the NSE. Okay, the FII is basically now doing the infusion. Okay, when there is an infusion in the NSE, suppose the NSE was at you can say 80, but because of the infusion it now become 120, and as the infusion continues it's become 200 and more. Okay, so what is creating here? It is called the illusion of wealth. And why I'm saying this, it is an illusion of wealth, because the strength of the companies listed under NSE is not going higher. Only the foreign currency is getting invested in the NSE, and because the currency is in the high denomination, that's why the value goes higher and higher. All right, but in reality this is called the illusion of wealth, because the strength of the companies listed under the NSE is not going higher. Only the high denomination value has been infused in the market, so that's the values goes up. Okay, so when we talk about the investors like this one, so what the investor will see, investor will only see the value, because there are chances that might be that person is not so aware about the reason. Okay, but what he's seeing that what is in front of him. All right, this is the case. Secondly, if we talk about the case of diffusion, like instead of infusion of the capital, now it's become a diffuser. The FII is now taking the money back. Then what will happen? From 200 the value will become 120, and from 120 the value will become 80. Okay, so here what we are seeing that there is a downfall in the value of the NSE or the stock market. Is there any defectory in the NSE's company? No. But why the value is going down? Because the high denomination money which has been infused by the FII, which had been invested by the FII is not taking back. It means that the high denomination money which put the values higher is not, because of the withdrawal, the value is getting lower and lower and lower. All right. So again, what will happen? That investor, this one, he will only see this value. Okay, he will only see this value. He will not entertain the reason behind it. Okay, and what will happen? They will get an idea that the market is going down and down, the market is shrinking, so that we should put our money back, and this will create a chaos. Okay, that's why here's the role of investor protection and the education fund come in the picture. Okay, it means that the protection should be provided to the investors during the cases of the bubbling booms. Why? Because of the FII, the market was going up just because of high denomination of money. The performance of the companies were as usual, right? So this causes a bubbling boom. Why? Because the investor is only seeing the value rise up. Reason? No. Okay, he just see the value rise up, and when he does not receive what he has invested, this will be a loss condition, or you can say when the bubble will blast. So that's why it is known as the bubbling boom. Educational fund, or you can say the education specifically to know the reason behind the downfall and the upfall. Okay, like here, the investor is only seeing the downfall. He will get an idea that market is shrinking. He will start withdrawing the money when the market will actually shrink down. Okay, because prior to this, only the high denomination money will going out. But right now, when the domestic investors started doing the same, so again the market is going to be collapsed. All right, so this kind of situation could be, you can say, removed or could be avoided. That's why investors protection and education fund is provided. Secondary Market Advisory Committee, or in short known as the SMAC. SMAC advises SEBI on the matters related to the development and the regulation of the secondary market, consists of the market participant, experts, and the SEBI official. Okay, Secondary Market Advisory Committee, SMAC, what do you mean by this? Like basically when we talk about the capital market, when we talk about the capital market, then remember it is having two forms. First form is primary market. Second form is secondary market. What is the difference between the primary market and secondary market? Okay, to understand this, first we have to understand the IPO. IPO, what do you mean by the IPO? IPO is basically known as the initial public offering. Okay. To understand the IPO, first we have to take an example so that we could understand it in the better form. Suppose this is a company XYZ Private Limited. Okay. If the company is the private limited, what does it mean? It means that outsider participation not allowed. Okay. If we take an example that the 50 shareholders are basically this private company, so it means that apart from these 50 shareholders, no one is allowed to participate in the management and the shares of the XYZ Private Limited. Okay, so as we had taken the examples in the previous lecture, here I'm going to give in another example. Suppose the total capital available with the XYZ is 100 crore. Okay, but due to some launch of the new project, due to some new things, whatsoever you could call it, the company required additional 100 crores. Okay, and to fulfill the requirement, there are two criteria. First, we call it internal fulfillment. Okay. Second, we call it external fulfillment. Okay. So if we go by this, if we talk about the first one, which is called as the internal fulfillment, what will happen by this? These 50 shareholders will raise their capital in a ratio that the amount will raise as 100 crores. It means that total amount will be 200 crores. 100 crores previous, 100 crores additional, 200 crores. First situation. Okay. But second case, if we have taken, the case is the external fulfillment. It means that if the shareholders of the XYZ Private Limited is not in the capacity to raise the fund by themselves, then what will happen? They will divide this 100 crores into the shares of equal value. Like suppose 100 crores, it means that they will divide it into the 100 shares at 1 crore each. Okay, so this is called the shares division. All right, and to make subscription of these shares, what they required? They required launching of them into the stock market, right? Into the stock market, whether it's a national stock exchange, all right. Second, whether it's a Bombay Stock Exchange, right? Any of them, they are required to launch their shares, and for this they are required the listing. Okay, like they have to list their company XYZ Private Limited with any of them, National Stock Exchange or the Bombay Stock Exchange. Then only they are allowed to launch their shares, and you can say present their shares to the general public or the investors for the subscription. And when the listing will happen, as we had discussed, the XYZ Private Limited will be converted into which? Converted into the XYZ Limited, right? So what happened here? Here it is known as the private one. Here it has become the publicly held company. Got it? How the things work, I had already told you in the previous lecture. Now I have just given an example. Okay. So basically here we have seen the listing of the company. We have seen the, you can say, division of the shares. But what is the primary market, secondary market, and what's about the IPO, initial public offering? What is the meaning of them? So basically you could say that IPO is, by definition, whenever any company, or you can say organization, present shares for subscription to general public through stock markets for the first time, known as the IPO or initial public offering. Okay, so remember, whenever any company or organization presents shares for the subscription to the general public through the stock markets, because listing is required, for the first time, known as the IPO or the initial public offering. Like here in this case, we could see the XYZ was having its 50 shareholders and they were doing the business with them. But because they required the additional 100 crores and they are unable for the internal fulfillment, so to raise this, you can say the value, they launched the 100 shares at rupees 1 crores. Okay, and to make the subscriptions they required listing of the shares into the stock market through the listing, either in the National Stock Exchange or in the Bombay Stock Exchange. Okay, and because they are launching it for the first time, so that's why it will be known as the IPO, initial public offering. Okay, an IPO of worth rupees, how much? 100 crores. It is an IPO of worth rupees 100 crores because 100 crores is a total requirement by the XYZ. Got it? The IPO, how the IPO happens, how the IPO works. Okay, now what is the primary market, what is the secondary market? Okay, so please just remember, primary market deals with the IPO. Okay, so you can say whenever the company launches the IPO, or you can say launches the shares for the first time for the subscriptions and all, this will be launched in the primary market in the form of IPO. Okay, so please just write down, IPO will always be launched in the primary market and private market only. Got it? Whereas when we talk about the secondary market, launching of shares after, you can say launching IPO, will always be done in the secondary market. Got it? So whenever the company will launch the IPO, will be launched in the primary market, but when the company will launch any other shares for the subscription apart from the IPO, will be launched in the secondary market. Okay, so now I hope you have got an idea about the things about the IPO, secondary market and all this. So secondary market advisory committee is a structure framework of the SEBI, advises the SEBI on the matters related to the development and regulation of the secondary market consists of market participants, expert and the SEBI officials, so that comprehensive discussion could be done. Okay, so students, basically in this lecture we had finished several facts and figures regarding the regulatory framework and the market participants. In the next lecture we will continue from here. Till then, just revise all the facts and figures we had discussed in this lecture. Be ready for the another lecture. With this note, let's end this lecture, and what we say thank you.